So just hang tight, everybody.
It is now.
Father God, we thank you right now in the name of Jesus, Lord God. We're pre-praying because we want to decree and declare that you will be with us tonight. And most of all, God, not only will you be with us, but God, we are praying that there will be no technical difficulties in the name of Jesus. Amen. Let's get it.
Amen.
You're looking at the camera. I'm looking at the camera, sis.
Yes, yes, yes.
And we're in 3, 2, 1.
Hi, my name is Nakia.
And I'm Vawn, Gretta.
And welcome to this episode of The Real
and Raw Talk Show,
where there are no boundaries
and no judgments.
Awesome. We want to welcome you, our audience, our guests, as we celebrate the resilient legacy of American history in the Black culture. So some of you may have noticed we started at 8:55 p.m. and this will be our new way of doing things going forward. So we have made this decision to give you a pre-show sneak peek, so to speak. So you will know our intentions for each episode. This will also allow us to spend more time with our audience, with our audience and with our guests to engage with them and really get down to the real and the raw and the nitty gritty. Because our hour moves so fast and we like to have fun. So again, let's get into the no judgment zone.
All right, sis. Now, our sponsors for today's episode is Christ-like Graphics. And as some of you know from our last episode, they've chosen to continue supporting Real and Raw as sponsors until the end of February 2021. Now, remember, everyone, be sure to grant StreamYard permission to see your comments during the show. It only takes a few seconds, I promise. So if you guys go to www.streamyard.com/Facebook. Let me say that again. I was just making sure I said it right. You know, in your head, you're thinking. So www.streamyard.com/Facebook. Remember, this is the way we can stay interactive because that's the dynamic of our show. To our audience, you guys, feel free to post comments, let it rip, and ask questions because we're going to throw this at our guests as we move through the show. Right, sis?
Absolutely, sis. So tonight, we chose to give away an awesome prize courtesy of our show. You could receive one gift, and this is how you can win. So from this episode's commercial, the pre-show commercial, the first person that emailed us the most names of everyone in the video in the correct order of appearance is getting the gift selected specifically to relate to this episode.
Ooh, child. Let me tell you something. I want to keep it for myself. Now, here's a hint. Everybody gets a free answer. This is Zora Neale Hurston. You got to find out where she is on the video. But anyway, great short stories by African-American writers. And bam, this wonderful quick book about African-American history. You guys, I'm going to read by them for myself.
Yes, it is. I'm like, sis, you got to give those away. Don't worry about yours. We got to give those away, though. So, hey, so keep going. Hey, I'm going to give y'all a hint. I know I'm not supposed to. But y'all know No. I'm not gonna tell them that. No, I'm just okay.
Go ahead.
I'm gonna keep on going. So, hey, y'all, they're gonna appear in this order of categories. Now, investors, athletes, writers, poets, activists, composers, entertainers, vocalists, playwrights, and politics. Oh, sis, over to you.
Girl. So if you watch the commercial introducing this episode, it was designed to have you become present to our history. You know, awaken your souls to the faces of those that have come before us and those that were with us not that long ago. And we lost in senseless acts of violence, injustice, and even those that are still with us now, showing us the way to overcome all of these adversities of this world. And so you saw photos that may have caused you to feel the travesty and death of the innocent, children, the men, women, and even the joy of those survivors, the leaders, the actors, the actresses, the activists, And so this visual is for you to see those faces of those who, like you and I, were born, lived, died, overcame, and saw victory and defeat. So who all made a difference one way or another. Now, those that created pathways and those that continue to fight the good fight until we're all equal, truly equal, we have survived.
Absolutely, sis. I totally agree with that. And as you listen today to this panel of guests, consider your hopes, dreams, realities, and anticipations. We want you to choose if you will remain suppressed without hope, or if you would choose to stand for your human rights to live, heal, be well, know success, victory, love, laughter, which we do a lot of, and joy as you survive and overcome doubt, hopelessness, lack, loss, and fear.
Amen, sis. Come on. You better say it. You own it tonight, girl. Now, look, we want you to pick yourself up. And we know that you are worth it and you're worthy of all the goodness that's available to all mankind, regardless of the colors of your skin, the thickness of your hair, the money in your bank accounts, and the position you hold on your jobs, the community you reside in, or the condition of your heart. You're worth it.
Absolutely. And you are not only and should not be known. You are not. Like, so seriously, you are not and should not be known nor measured by the material possessions in which you hold, but the heart and soul of your spirit as we move throughout this world, on this earth, in this life, and lead our families, our children, and our communities, and build from nothing to create with only our hands, like for real, our hands have the capacity to create. Living a life full of love, laughter, tears, and joy and possibility. We can achieve all that our hearts desires without taking from anybody else, fighting against anyone, including ourselves and our loved ones and our family, and breaking down one another. We don't have to do that. We can do this together, standing for and supporting one another, free, strong, healed, and united. Please enjoy this episode.
Hello. Hey, everybody. Happy National Freedom Day. And this is the first day of
February 2021.
Come on. Whoop, whoop. How you feeling, sis? Hey, you good?
I'm good.
You loose?
I'm loose.
Okay. All right.
I need to. Okay.
All right.
Hey, everybody. My name is Nakia Franklin.
And I'm Vawn Gretta.
And welcome to this episode of The Real
and Raw Talk Show,
where there are no boundaries
and no judgments.
Absolutely, indeed. So we want to welcome you, our audience, and our guests as we celebrate the resilient legacy of American history in the Black culture. Now, it's time to get real and raw. So stick around, post questions, share, and start your own watch party now, and be ready to enter the no judgment zone.
All right then, sis. Thank you. So let's introduce our first guest, Professor Shauna Williams. She obtained her first degree in criminal justice from UH and has a passion for teaching children in K through 12, although that didn't last too long. She's taught for 45 years and obtained her master's in history from TSU. And Dr. M. Petrie, her mentor, was very important in her life. Now, she had an extensive understanding of civil rights and led Shauna towards her lifelong quest to learn, understand, and seek the truth behind slavery and the civil rights movement. Growing up, she immersed herself in our history and genealogy, and she has a huge passion for history and wishes people would be more invested in history. And she's a professor both with Texas Southern University, where I met her, and the Houston Community College System in Houston, Texas.
Awesome. So, hey, Shauna.
Hey, Shauna.
Welcome. So, our next guest is Elizabeth Liz Liba. You did well. And I still couldn't get it right. Oh my God.
She did rehearse it, Liz. She rehearsed it.
Elizabeth has been an educator for 20 years, teaches on time as an instructional designer, and she is a host of a co-host. She joined a podcast as a host soon after the death of George Floyd and began to gain recognition by using the platform to speak on his death. Now, she has begun her own Black History and Culture Academy just last month, January 2021, and it's been considered the top LinkedIn voice. Has been published on CNN and was featured in the New York Times.
All right then, everybody, the beautiful activist Liz Liba. Hey girl, how are you? She is an activist.
Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you for being here. Okay, so then that would be me. I'm sorry, y'all know I do 40 million things. Everybody, please pray for me to get somebody to do all this technical stuff so I can just sit here and be cute like my twin over there.
You are cute.
She's laughing all cute. Okay, yeah, but all right. Anyway, so now, affectionately called Uncle Mike by myself, no blood relation, but I claim him, okay? We have the extraordinary V. Michael McKay, and on with us. He's a gospel legend and American gospel songwriter, conductor, clinician, speaker, author, publisher, and just absolutely a beautiful soul. He is a 2-time Dove Award winner and inductee into the Gospel Music Hall of Fame. And V. Mike is no short of a visionary reflective of his published work. V. Mike, the V. Michael McKay Hymns for Him Now, which is a 62-song hymnal supplement. Now, as a clinician, speaker, author, and publisher, he has dedicated his life to the greater level of ministry. As an educator, V. Mike presently teaches a songwriting class at a Houston-based college and is a host of a talk show called The Truth at Houston's KTSU radio station, which is 90.9 FM. And currently, V. Mike has teamed up with a host of others to catalog a historical hymn book titled The Sacred Works from the African Diaspora. Welcome, V. Mike.
Hello, everybody. And come Miss Raw and Miss Real, that's a great combination.
We starting already.
We love it. We love
yes,
it.
I do. Y'all already, you know, it's really going to be really raw tonight. I said, oh boy, with Shauna and her poised historian self, and then with Liz, and then she's so passionate and strong in her voice, and then here comes V. Mike to bring us all of his humble and precious wisdom. And with all that humor, we're gonna have fun, guys. Go ahead, sis.
Yes, we are. So finally, we want to introduce someone we are totally excited to have.
Yes, indeed.
Join us as a part of our alliance. our very own resident counselor therapist, because it's all psychology.
Gee.
Dr. Melvin R. Hayden of Savannah, Georgia. Hey.
Hey, what's going on? How you doing? Good evening, good evening, good evening, everybody.
Good evening.
Good evening.
Sis.
Oh, it's me. I'm doing a bunch of stuff. What am I doing? Oh, my Lord, have mercy. Okay, so it's time, guys. Let me tell y'all something. Okay, it's time for. I'm sorry, we family, right? I can make mistakes.
You
Nakia,
can. Yes,
thank you, baby. Now, let me tell you guys. I did that. So here's part one of a poetic piece by Daniel Millisock. The poem is called 40 Acres and a Mule. And on a personal note, I want to say that this gentleman, and it's just a gentleman, and a really lovely soul, and truly humbled, is massive in his creative art. And this piece I found, or he kind of got on one of my threads, and it had nothing to do with this poem, but he put it in there. And so I'm so glad he did, because it's a long 10-minute poem. So we're cutting it in half for you. So just make sure that you have your listening ear on, okay? So that you can remember when we come with part two. So I just wanted to give you the precursor. So you guys, please enjoy 40 Acres and a Mule by Daniel Millisock.
My name is Daniel Millisock. I'm a video journalist and poet currently living in Seattle, Washington. The video poem that I created is called 40 Acres and a Mule. 40 Acres and a Mule is about inequality and addressing a vast number of problems that has plagued our country for many years. Every day is a blessing, yet every night I lie awake, disappointed with sleep depression, not knowing how much more I can take. I was hesitant at first to share my inner thought, then reminisce the war in Gettysburg and the reasons they fought. With the proposition that we all were created equal but then not treated the same, I became weak and weary, absorbing this pain. I discovered a way out. My mind was a mess, so I wrote this poem to help me handle the stress. As we flattened the curve, reaching the apex and the peak, I had to give it all to God, the missing part of the link. Now God gives me strength, along with my family's support, and I have faith in humanity, and life is too short. So when the dynamics of life attempts to tear you down, stay true and authentic, and smile when you're around. Make the best of what you have when things go astray. Get up when you're down and don't forget to pray. At any moment, if you feel you've lost your way, always remember, never was a cloudy day. Your golden dreams have always been clear. Set aside all that self-doubt and eliminate the fear. Don't think it's selfish to let yourself shine. It's time to let your mind, body, and soul align. As we struggle to stay positive throughout it all, be persistent on optimism as we crumble and fall. We're taking an economic hit with travel and trade, now isolated in our homes, crunching numbers to find a way. The discomfort sets in as the pockets get low. Confusion sets in with little direction to go. Natural leaders are born, and they hold the key to educate the future generations and change what they see. The fear in the media has us terrified to death. We're mentally sick and tired of holding our breath. The mixed messages showed, the confusion exposed, has us walking on eggshells trying not to cut our toes. Not knowing who is credible and what to believe, seems the agenda is already set with a trick up their sleeve. Who can we depend on? It's hard to know who to trust with the economic corruption and the bad choices we lust. So I attempt to seek answers on the selections we make. But it's difficult to decide on what's real and what's fake. CNN can pretend and persuade us with stocks, while others are influenced by the media on Fox. Social media is the winner, and we all lose. We are part of this pandemic, spreading fake news. We need to educate ourselves on what's right and what's wrong. Listen to positive music and hit repeat on the song. Repetitive media stations pushing hate and beat 'em. What happened to good music expressing true love and freedom? Now is the time to be loving and kind. It's a time to seek the truth, not hyperbolizing falsehoods, then lying to our youth. We need to be more rational and stop relying so much on emotion. The evil media controls us with this devilish potion. Don't let social media get inside of your head. Grab a book and a novel and share what you read. You are not defined by your total number of shares. You may only get a few comments and likes, but don't think no one cares. Be true to who you are, instead of what the media tells you to be. Stop trying to be normal and let your true beauty be free. Be you. Feel alive. Be the leader in the hive. Let your wings spread wide. It's time we take a dive. The leap of faith in yourself has more value than wealth. Citizens of the world, how is your health? Change is coming, and it's up to all of us to chip in. We can start with the war on drugs and the opioid addiction, side effects from the scripts and another refill. The anxiety you feel can't be fixed with a pill. With healthcare at the helm, we need to end the abuse. Our veterans need us not to pick and choose. We ought to show more gratitude for national security and defense, standing firm with our soldiers on the same side of the fence. Now, border wall is essential so we can secure this land. This idea should come into effect without making one feel less of a man. America offers opportunity, and that's why immigrants return. We don't think about their struggles because it's not our concern. My main concern is the student loan debt that is owed. The existence of this financial crisis on this never-ending road. I understand we have budgets and we're under a spending freeze. A more reason to enact a wealth tax and guarantee family leave. Family time is important, and this foundation should be certain. We need new environmental infrastructure so energy is not a burden. Foreign policy is essential and a national security concern, teaching world peace overseas with so much to learn. Regardless of status, this is an unprecedented time. We need to stop pushing the underprivileged to the end of the line. Was the United States experiment an epic fail? Cats versus rats, the new American tale? If you could change the past, would you bring slavery back? Working sun up to sundown, living in a filthy shack, shackled and handcuffed, begging for the day to pass? If history repeats itself, would this still be considered first class? These are the anger concerns that are upsetting my health. My ancestors were slaves, and it was the spread of the wealth. It is the lynching and the rape that lingers within. Every day we're still looked at and judged by the color of our skin.
Wow.
Phenomenal. I know
Wow.
it kind of feels like it cut off, but snap, 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 right?
Yes.
It gets deeper. I
And
love
this
it. Thank
goes
you.
on, because when we come back to part 2, he's going to bring it home. Like, it's just amazing. And we're definitely going to share the link so you can watch the whole piece in its entirety.
Absolutely.
So a lot of people don't understand the value of knowing our history and why knowing history will help shape the future. So let's get into it. Professor Shauna, based on your studies and investigation of how we educate our children, how are our children being introduced to slavery and taught about their history when it's first brought to them? This is where you come from. This is who you are.
Well, to be honest, if we want to talk about slavery, American slavery, or any other type of slavery, our kids from K through 12 aren't really taught that. Even some African American history college professors, when they teach African American history, they start with American slavery. They don't even start over in Africa, because our history starts way before we get here on the shores of America. Even like I've been on a riot. My kids go to Lamar Consolidated in the Independent School District, and for the last 3 years, no Black History program. They don't even discuss it. Don't bring it up. Ask my kids different questions. They can't tell us. So they're not teaching it in the school. So as parents and as a community, we have to educate our own kids.
Wow. That is so powerful to know that, because that means our children are being educated on the streets versus being educated in an environment where it's safe and they can learn their true history. So can you take us back to the beginning of what really happened? So we want you to educate us and really share with us what it is that we as the African-American Black race should know and be aware of.
If you want to go way back, I always tell my students, and anybody I'm talking about, when we talk about African American history or African history, we have to talk about when we were in Africa, who those people were, like Mansa Musa, who those folks were in Africa. Even talk about the African slave trade. We have to talk about those things before we can even talk about how we have African American. People want to start with American history, how we got here, but it starts way before. Even like I have a friend that wrote a book for kids, and she talks about all the kings and queens, pharaohs, and how they relate to us, and so that kids, young girls and boys, can see themselves in African history. And so we have to talk about the diaspora before we can even get to American history.
Well,
And a lot of people, they're like, oh, even students, we don't want to talk about that. I don't want to go back that far. That's too far back. Let's talk about the here and now. But we can't even get to what is race and why we have racism until we talk about before we even arrived on these shores.
okay, well,
And
tell
what
us
that
about
Excuse
that.
me, Shauna, I'm sorry, sis.
Oh,
Can you
my bad.
explain what diaspora means?
Yeah.
Diaspora is when we talk about, say, for instance, we have African descent people, and when they start dispersing to other countries. So we have them in America. Even as some people don't know that Africans, United States got like 4% of the slaves, but in the end, you have more slaves here than any other country, any European country, any South American country, because when we start talking about the second Middle Passage and they start breeding, we start having, by the time we get to the Civil War, we got 4 million slaves, right? So we have to start looking at what that looks like. And then when we talk about the diaspora, we have a large African population in Europe, China, not just here in the United States, South America, everywhere. So that's what the diaspora is.
Awesome. So can you give us a just like an overview of our history? Take us back to that space that you're saying we really need to look at that before we can look at anything else.
Yeah. So I always tell people to start in Africa. Even when we talk about genealogy, you have to retrace your roots, right? So start in Africa. Start talking about the Atlantic slave trade. First, people always assume that it's United Kingdom that was trading slaves, but the first group of people are going to be the Portuguese. And even when we look at the Europeans, and I always tell my students one thing about them, they're landlocked. So once the Portuguese starts going down the African coast, starts trading with the Africans and start making a profit, all the other European countries are like, oh, I want that power, right? I want to be able to trade. Some students get mad at me because I even tell them, when we think about the African slave trade, they're like, well, who was involved in the slave trade? Who was in Africa? Africans, right? But I tell them that they were instrumental in the slave trade because they didn't send over at first, they weren't giving the best to these European slave traders. They might say, okay, we're not going to send our women. So at the beginning, you'll see a lot of men go because they're not going to send the women because they know the women were what? Valuable. They know those were the, how to keep that name going on, how to make, family extend. So they weren't sending. And then eventually when we start talking about France and United Kingdom, we'll start seeing a change of that. So the first, we see South America, we see the Caribbeans will be full of slaves. Like I said, United States gives about 4%, but that 4% will start to grow once we start seeing the 13 colonies start to expand. Once we start seeing these colonies expand out into the western parts, we start seeing more and more, and they start talking about the second Middle Passage. People up north, they're like, oh, we want slaves, but they start talking about their Christianity. So, and they say you can't be a slave if you're what? A Christian. So it starts to change when we talk about the second Middle Passage. So then we start seeing more and more slave breeding. And that's how we grow here in America. And then we start talking about how do we come up with our own African-American culture. And then even when we talk about today, Black History Month. I always tell people Black History Month is American history. It's going to overlap. While we're talking about race, even in my African-American history course, this is like our second week. So we talk about what is race, because we can't move forward about African-American history until we know what is race. How do we come up on this race thing? Where, how many races are there? Because a lot of students say, oh, well, they start counting, well, it's white, Hispanic. I'm like, no, there's only one race. And so we have to start talking about how that looks before we can even deal with racism and why we are still where we are today.
Wow. Thank you so very much. I mean, that is powerful, and it highlights a point where before we can know our future, before we can understand where we're going, we have to know where we came from. We have to know why we behave the way we behave, and we think the way we think, we look the way we look, and why we have such division. So if you can, I want to bring Melvin in for just a second. So with what she said concerning the different races and the mindsets of people, how important is it for us to really focus on being healed from that experience? And we hadn't even began to like get into some of the other aspects of it, but just an understanding of just from what was shared so far, that we're not even being, our children are not even being educated.
Well, that's because from a psychological standpoint, that nobody's willing to understand what trauma is and how we got here. So you have to address the trauma that's a part of slavery, that's a part of civil rights, that's a part of racism. You have to address the trauma. See, it can't be taught in schools until they come up with a curriculum that's going to teach that trauma first, because you're not going to teach race and slavery in a school system, especially K through 12, because most people that teach it are going to teach it in a way of division. It's going to be divisive. It's going to be presented divisive, and the students are going to act divisive. So if you're teaching a first grader about slavery, and the only thing you start with is not telling that first grader about themselves, or not educating the other races about that race and how they got here, then they're gonna mix all that up. And so at the playground or at the lunch table or when they walk into the bathroom, they're going to start saying things that are going to be racially insensitive. They're going to be culturally insensitive. They're going to be environmentally insensitive. They're going to be socioeconomically insensitive, because you can't mash all that together and expect the elementary school kid at that level, K through 3, to understand that. 4 through 6 may be different. 7 through 8 and 9 may be different. And then, of course, when you get in high school. So if you're going to start the conversation has to be started with an effective way in the curriculum to teach that, so that they can learn it properly, so that they can start respecting one another because of where each other come from and how we got here. Because like the professor said, it's only one race.
Absolutely. Thank you for sharing that. So with that being said, I'm going to move forward towards today for a moment. Not today, so to speak, but Liz, you had an experience yourself personally when it came down to a situation where you had an encounter with the police, police officers. Can you share your experience about that?
Yeah, sure. I think I've been really vocal about the idea ever since the George Floyd killing, the murder that we all witnessed, that we need to be mindful of how Black and brown folks are policed. And they're policed a lot more heavily. We a lot of times have interactions that the dominant culture is totally unaware. We're living in two different realities. So for myself, I've been really vocal about the idea that police brutality and racial profiling and inequity in terms of arrests, getting stopped, pulled over by police, arrests, getting searched, sentencing, amount of sentencing, who's sentencing is typically going to be very disparate in terms of the Black community and also brown communities as compared to the white community. So I posted about that on LinkedIn when the Kyle Rittenhouse situation occurred, and I felt I was disappointed by the fact that you have people raising millions of dollars for somebody that admittedly shot 2 individuals in the face and killed them, hurt another individual with an AR-15, totally illegal to purchase an AR-15 if you're underage, and we're gonna laud it as a hero, bail money raised, people saying, hey, this is just a mistake. And actually Bernice King posted on Twitter and said, that's really a big difference from Khalif Browder, who sat in Rikers Island for 4 years for supposedly stealing a book bag. and ended up later killing himself. For 3 of those 4 years, he was in solitary confinement, which anyone that's worked in or adjacent to the prison system knows that can be mentally just horrific for somebody. And apparently it was proven later that he was not guilty of doing that. In regards to the fact, we see that our Black and brown children, those who work in the school system, I've worked in K through 12 and in college, there's just disparate treatment even at that level. That's why we have the school to prison pipeline that we so often refer to, when our brown children and Black children are just not even in the school system disciplined in the same manner as those children in the majority culture. So I wrote about it. I wrote about my own experience on LinkedIn. I posted about the fact that I was arrested when I was 19, something I was very ashamed of. It was a false arrest, and I was accused of stealing a pack of batteries, which I had a receipt for, in a pharmacy. And they called the police because I was rifling through my book bag, which was why it came to mind that, wow, I had a book bag. And the whole situation where I got arrested was because the item was in my book bag. And when they asked me, hey, what's going on here? You know, the alarm's going off, and I hadn't left the store. And even at the time when I spoke with my attorney, he was like, well, you hadn't even left the store. So technically you didn't steal anything because they stopped you before you even left. And, you know, it was just everything that was done in terms of the procedure, called in the police, not giving me the opportunity to giving me the benefit of the doubt, the opportunity to actually produce a receipt. I had the receipt with me the whole time. I didn't find it until after I posted bond, because my mom had to come I was arrested. The police came. They took me to jail for stealing a $2.49 pack of batteries. And I had to post bond, fingerprints, you know, handcuffs, driven to the jail, had to post bond. I was in Gainesville in a college. My mom posted bond in Fort Lauderdale. She had to drive 4.5 hours to pick me up. So I was in custody in holding until I was allowed, once my mom posted bond, I was allowed to, was released into her custody. And when I got inside the car, they gave me my belongings back, and I looked through my book bag. I'm like, I know I have this receipt, and it was tucked inside a folder. And I remember just breaking down hysterically and crying, because I was like, I had the receipt the whole time, but no one would give me the benefit of the doubt. And it just kind of paralleled the idea that our Black and brown children are typically guilty before innocent. And CNN did see that article, that post on social media. The post went somewhat viral, and then I did an op-ed piece on CNN's website, and that article went viral. It had about 2 million hits on the CNN website, and a lot of people reached out, and some supported me, some were very hateful, and there was a lot of vitriol about, you know, why was I picking on a 17-year-old, and, you know, I should stop whining and go back to Africa. I mean, some of the posts and some of the messages on social media and some of the emails I got were horrific, and it just speaks to the idea of how people in this country are so clueless about what Black folk experience. And even as an adult woman now, if I see police in my rear view, I automatically freeze up, because now I have a fear of the police, which I never had, because I had that interaction with them. And that has literally, it's not a bad apple thing. It's just one bad apple, but it keeps happening to us. Sandra Bland and myself and other women are also racially profiled. But that's a story that hadn't been told. And I felt like it was my responsibility to talk about it, to let a different face be seen, because there's a face that the police are saying, which is, oh, well, it was a 6'5", 225-pound Black man. So I felt intimidated, or I felt I had to use force, or I had to arrest because the person wouldn't comply, or there's always something that victim blames or shames. And I was like, well, I was 110 pounds, a buck 10 and 5 feet 2. What was the reason there? So there's always something that they're using, and we all know that it's this color of our skin. It's just plain.
Absolutely. You're right about it. You're right about it.
Thank you so much for sharing that. V Mike.
Yes.
Can you chime in on this conversation? We know that you have a lifelong experience, and we want you to chime in on all of this and get the conversation moving, even beyond what it already is, because this is some serious stuff, and it's important that we learn about these things and we are being made aware that this happens to us.
Well, I'm gonna start with Liz, if I can. Liz, what's important about your story is that the story is told, and the story is told from your point of view. What I'm doing with music in the Black church is in this effort to put together a hymn book of African American composers, is to tell the story from our point of view, which is very, very important. The professor from I teach a class at HCC in songwriting, and it's interesting that I'm at HCC teaching a songwriting class to people of all different ethnic backgrounds, of course, of which you know, and to watch them grasp online classes, even with class being filled, and it's a 2 hour and 50-minute class. At the end of the class, no one wants to leave the line. They still want to get more information. Well, a part of the telling of the story is to tell it from one's own point of view. And even as we talk about our history has to be told from our point. And as I interact with the African American church and the Black church, you know, even with him singing the songs that we sing, they are wonderful texts. Have nothing against the texts themselves, but it's interesting that we would be validated, Vawn, in an educational arena, institutions of higher education, as a quote educated musician once we learn music of non-African American background. I mean,
Right.
you're celebrated when you know the European cultures, and
Absolutely.
so you know, yeah, we learn spirituals and we learn music of our culture, but we're not validated. When I first
Right.
years ago, it was taboo to do gospel music within the walls of the school. But that music has always been an avenue to tell our story. And to the
Mhm.
psychiatrist, I agree with you, man. Not until we get to the root of the matter. Uh, my grandmother would have sang a song with lyrics like, "I have a telephone in my bosom. I can call him and tell him what I want." The reason
Yeah.
could sing that song, which we don't sing that anymore, but we really should, is because now we have all kind of other means of getting our stories told, speaking about the abuse, speaking about the injustices. When we'd walk into Wellens department store with my grandmother, an 18-year-old non-African American girl would, as a girl, and I began to speak out. My grandmother say, "No, I got this. You shut up." And to watch her shame this young girl with her wisdom and her age as an African American woman, highly respected in the community. But when she walked into this department store where she's spending her dollars, she's referred to as a girl. But she knew how to combat that. But then when she got to the church, she would say stuff like, "I have a telephone in my bosom." She knew she couldn't call EEO at the time, or she couldn't call the manager and report this girl, but she could tell this God of her salvation about it. And he always had ways and means of giving us the answers to our questions. So religion at that point in Christianity wasn't used as a weapon against us, but it was used as a tool of our escape, to soothe our souls, to calm our minds, which is absent today sometimes in the language of the music that we sing in the church. But I think it's important now for us to resurface some of the stuff. We did a presentation on a TBS station a few weeks ago, Vawn, Gretta, and we traced music from 1916 to the present time. And to hear the music in that room of these
Yeah.
singers came in unrehearsed, but all had lived long enough to know some stuff, starting with Dorsey and
Mhm.
some of his themes and the text contextually, how these stories are embedded in these songs. As someone the history of a nation, just listen to the music that we were singing. So when we were singing "Sign Me Up for the Christian Jubilee," write my name on the wall, and we going back to "Precious Lord," to some of the text that we sang then that doesn't
Yeah.
resound. As a matter of fact, I want to close this thought out. Greta and I was at a school, a public school, or a private school here in Houston, and Black History Month came up, and the kids, we were we were assigned to plan a Black History program. The theme was war, WAR. So I chose a hymn and to teach the kids all 4 verses, the telling of the story again. And in a high school environment, but 80% Mexican Americans, Mexicans, not even Mexican Americans, just Spanish speaking people. Some didn't really speak English very well. So and one little boy said to me that, and to Miss Gretta, he said he wouldn't be able to make rehearsal on that Wednesday because he had to go to court with his mother because they
Yeah.
were deport her.
Mm.
So he came back to the class that Monday, and I asked, how did everything go? About 20 kids in the class, 24 kids in the class. He said, it went okay. We have to go back. They reset another date. I said, well, what about your father? He said, they're on the run. They're looking for him now. And
Wow.
so we got quiet in the class. I said, did you learn your verse? He said, yes. I said, well, sing it. And he sang, must I be carried to the skies on flowery beds of ease while others fought to win the prize and sail through bloody seas? The little African American girl jumped up. She said, yes, I got it. Then we sing, sure I must fight if I would reign. Increase my courage, Lord. I'll bear the toil, endure the pain supported by thy word. And then they all say, then we sing, we when the battle is over, we shall wear a crown. Well, that was in an environment with about 20 some kids in a charter school. But when I was able to do that, but I had to leave the room by the time they began to sing because I was overwhelmed by what we call in church the power of the Holy Spirit. So I had to leave the room because I was about to, my behavior was about to, well, well, the tragedy is when I get to, I'm not to sing those texts. Young people can't identify. Am I so
Right.
cross a follower of the Lamb? Shall I fear to own his cause or blush to speak his name? Are there no foes for me to face? Must I not stem the flood? Is this vile world a friend to God, to grace to lead me on to God? Well, but then I get in this environment where these non English speaking students, high school students, they were able to connect their circumstances, their immediate circumstances with the text of these tunes. But my
Right.
church, I have to water that language. Surely don't teach our kids that. So there's something systemically wrong, even in our environments. And you guys are right. Education starts, I think, at home. It's our responsibility as parents and co-parents
Right.
to make sure that we expose our kids to the right language. Now, the language of that text I just quoted was not written by an African American. So it's really not just limited to, but it's how we educate, how we teach, how we expose. And we have a greater responsibility. I think it's ours to keep those things alive. Who would ever thought that I was around doing the Mississippi when we left Southern University back in and got on a bus to ride to Mississippi and to Alabama to Georgia when the riots were going on, and then here it is years later. I'm saying the same thing happened,
Mm.
but
Absolutely.
we have to change our language. No, we threw away the baby with the bathwater. We should have kept the language going. Freedom,
Hmm.
uh, we shall overcome. I mean, there's some
Right.
that we should have kept embedded in the language of the conversation that we were having. But moreover, you're right. We should tell it from our point of view. Now, the only way I believe we can get healed is not to go back to Africa, to our roots, but go back to Calvary. You know, as a
Mm.
Christian,
Come on.
that's what I believe. It's because I
All
think
right.
of Jesus still heals. It's good
Yeah.
for healing of the nation. It's good for healing of everybody. And of course, teaching in a college university, in a college environment, I don't talk that way. But I think the power of the text that's embedded, that the power that's embedded in the text when we begin to expose composers and talk about their text, whether black and unblack, but especially our stories and in our story. So
And don't you think that, Uncle Mike, don't you think that history is told in the music and music then reflects history?
sure, that's what I was saying earlier. Someone said, "Of trace the history of a nation, just listen to what we were singing, listen
Mm.
to music of the people." I mean, and it's why was Marvin Gaye singing these themes in the '60s? I mean, come on, that's crazy to me. The same things that are working now, he was doing he was we right back to that. Well, we're not really back to it because we never left it. We were all
Absolutely.
masked, but for some reason we don't know how to hold on to our troops and true to how we were.
Better tell it.
Mhm.
Thank you
Absolutely.
so much.
Thank you. Wow. Oh my God. Now when I say we're getting a history lesson tonight, we're getting a history lesson tonight.
I hope it's good to y'all out there because it's good to us. Since I think we need to get to that second half of the points, we can come back like fire.
Okay, but look, hold on, sis. Before we do that, I want the audience to ponder on a couple of questions, and I want them to give us feedback on these questions, whether it's in a chat, they email us or however, but I want them to ponder on these things. Do you believe that suppression of the Black culture was for economic gain, suppression of our voices because of the power behind our voices, even in the music, even in the songs, and dominance of our voices, or because they feared us? Those are some things that I want the audience to ponder on right there. And just think about, while you get ready to listen to the second part of the poem, just think about our history and our ancestors who were singing in the fields and wailing and humming, and the days or the nights that they were tilling the fields and they were trying to find a way home. And think for yourself what that home is. Was it a physical home? Was it a spiritual home? Were they trying to get home to God? Just consider for yourself where we've been, where we've come from, and what we're dealing with today in this society, in this community, and where we're going. Sis?
What I hope the world gains from this video is understanding. I would like the listener to comprehend some of the pain that most minorities feel on a daily basis. Looked at as immoral and considered a sin, feeling anger and rage, still waiting for my life to begin. Land ownership for blacks, not given an acre or the mule, not given books or an education, neglecting our mind as a tool, carrying this undying feeling that we're under attack, and someone is firm on the narrative that it's white versus black. They're solid on the separation that it's rep versus dem, then wonder why the fruit is spoiled and not examining the stem. This feeling of doubt, being stuck in a drought, is when you cultivate your body with nature so you can flourish and sprout. Agriculture and land are essential to growth, and feeding a healthy population is good to you and me both. The water that we drink, the vegetables we eat, misuse natural resources that we still use for heat, the air pollution we breathe, the spread of disease, the fracking of oil and cutting down trees. Terror is in America, and that's why I stay awake, trying to block out the distractions, witnessing the deals that we make. There's a continuous list of changes in regards to the EPA. Environmentalists are pissed, and the ramifications are today. The CDC cares and hopes we prepare. Our country is toxic with the hate germs that we share. Reselling the spoiled, tax breaks for the royal, no justice at all, no need to be loyal. Raising the prices on antibiotics and tax breaks for the rich. Silencing whistleblowers that they're so scared to snitch. Our country's greatest flaw is what happened to the rule of law. The criminal justice system is broken because it doesn't favor us all. Inequality of inheritance has caused the minority to fall, creating a free-for-all mentality in this never-ending brawl. Then we're kicked when we're down, and enough is enough. These everyday battles are the reasons we're tough. Historic oppression was the ultimate weapon to reduce our progression in regards to possession. And my suggestion, if we paid more attention, once we end the suppression, we'll be in the right direction. We're forced to fight for equal rights and coerced to struggle with all things. We're beginning to reach a new level of heights, knowing that we're not controlled by little strings. Greedy companies are breaking records and profiting on fear, then persevere with no respect. The true puppeteer. They hold the puppet strings and try to control every move. When powerless pawns become queens, that's how you improve. Even though you are damaged and you may feel battered, and when it's hard to trust in our government when it all seems scattered, end the panic in your head and control your political mind. Find the light in the darkness and make it a habit to be kind. Share your blessings with others so you can brighten their day. Being polite with good manners is the never-ending way. In this game called life, and how you achieve full respect is overcoming the desired outcome when playing against a stacked deck. Folding a good hand to fear is such a big waste. Believe that you can win when holding the joker and the ace. Have that Mamba mentality and you set the pace. It seems no matter what happens, we still focus on race. Who should we elect in our office and who should we remove? How can we move forward with the ballot when most disapprove? The officials who we elected took an oath to do this job. We're losing faith in our Constitution, and now the majority is getting robbed. But don't revise my words and make it black versus white. Represent our flag and stand up for what is right. The war waged by deed of title was organized theft. Now our questions are tossed in the trash and not being addressed. Someone should be accountable and acknowledge this pain. We were stripped of everything, even our own name. Loopholes in millions of acres of land, and all we're asking is for a helping hand. The same hands that would harvest bundles of cotton. The promise proclaimed was short-lived and forgotten. Threats of serious harm, forced to work 12 hours a day, disfigured and tortured so we wouldn't run away. Our diminished communities are poverty-stricken, still stuck in the back with a knife. The fate for my people seems to have already been written, deprived of basic necessities in life. Now broken and torn, our muscles are worn, feeling faint, badly bruised from the racial abuse. I revisit these thoughts and interrogate my own mind, and try to make sense of why people can be so cruel to mankind. Our history is violent, and I can't keep hiding how I feel. I can't continue to stay silent and pretend they aren't real. These feelings inside and why they're so intense is because breathing is a blessing in life, and now kneeling makes sense. These feelings inside make the movement alive. We've discovered this trauma and it can't be disguised. The cross to bear is there. Just know that you're not alone. This deep-rooted pain can't be handled on its own. We are wounded by our history and it's hard to move on. How can you raise a family when that foundation is gone? But I foresee peaceful times, united and free, by eliminating the negative feelings that are burning in me. We all need healing, and we'll be surprised what we'll find, that deep down inside we're all gentle and kind. If you hold on to the hurt building inside of you each day, you will never catch any of the blessings that are falling your way. It must start with ourselves. We need to clean up our selfish acts, start eating healthy and relying on the facts. We will come together once we put our minds at ease. We will overcome this virus and combat the spread of disease. Our culture will never advance if we continue to eat from the hand. We must address economic disparities and find a way to own land. With the Lord as my strength and God's armor of shield, it's time to regroup. It's time to rebuild. Our country's integrity is pending. Our government should yield. Give us what is unsettled, our mule in our field.
Lovely. Real quick, we just brought on Daniel just so you guys can see him. Say, hey, Daniel.
Hey.
You guys can also follow Daniel Millisock on YouTube and Facebook, and I would suggest do so because he's on the precipice of putting together a poetry book, right, Daniel?
Yes, I am.
Yes.
Thank you so much for being with us. We got to move on, but thanks for coming, okay? Okay, hang tight. All right, everybody, let's open up this portion of the conversation because as you can see, the hour is near of the conversation to all of our panelists. Now, we spoke on history in the movement, and we'll talk on where do we go from here. Right now, we want to gain insight on what we as a community are dealing with right now. And we would be irresponsible if we did not talk about the raid on the Capitol and the response of the police and the government. The extreme, and this is not to be confrontational, but it is to bring things to light. Understand the extreme differences between our peaceful protest in the streets and how we are attached as and labeled as criminals, animals, bad people. Yet on January 6, 2021, our then president incited an audience of disbelievers to attack not just the democratic process, but to overthrow the government. And we won't spend too much time on this, but we did want to simply have a real conversation about the impacts and implications and the difference between white and black America, which I personally hate both of those names because I know nobody who is actually the color white or the color black today. But we're going to talk about it. Amen. So this segment is open to all of you guys. We just want to go in and talk about that. You know, I know that Melvin and I had a conversation about earlier about how we seem to forget sometimes that white people have been a great part of the resilience of our history, and we can't group all of them in with the foolishness that we saw on that day. So you guys, please feel free to open up and let's talk.
That's why it's important to treat people as individuals, because as individuals we separate that which happened at the Capitol and that which were going on in the protests. You had just that, you had a mixture of people protesting in the streets during last year 2020 with George Floyd and Breonna Taylor. You had a plethora of people, races, colors, cultures, everybody, because something had been done wrong and now we were addressing it. And so with the riot on the Capitol, that was something different. And so we have to look at both of those situations differently. And then we have to sit back and say, okay, who am I in this? Where do I fit in this? How do I respond to this? What do I say to this as an individual? That's what starts the conversations that you'll have with the people in your community, the people that you work with, the people that you talk to every day, even your own family members. When you know who you are as an individual, then you can't be swayed by what you see on TV or what you see in the news, because you've already addressed it as the person that you are yourself. And your beliefs are your beliefs because they're made up of experiences. I've had trauma. Have I ever been on the ground with a knee in my back? Of course I have. How did I respond to that? How did I respond to that traumatic experience? What did I do when I got up off the ground, and what did I say to myself? How did that set me on a course to where I am now? What motivation did I take from it? What inspiration did I take from it? Who was I going to be because of that experience? And how was I going to relay that message to the next young African-American male or next white male or Hispanic male or anybody who is economic, who's in the economic downpour, socioeconomically classed, or any, for any reason like that. And so as an individual, I know who I am, so I can separate those things when I see them on TV as to how I'm going to respond to that. Because at the end of the day, I have to be responsible for who I am, and how I respond to that is also the energy that I put back into where I am.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. Anybody else? Michael, V Mike, excuse me. V Mike.
But what I took away from that for the cause of Black Lives Matter, justice was not just us, it was everybody. Like my brother said, I mean, it was a rainbow of people, of nationalities, different races, different colors came together in the name of justice. But it was under the umbrella of Black Lives Matter. But what we saw at the insurrection was not justice, it was injustice. And it wasn't as colorful. There was no rainbow of colors. Yeah, there's no absolutes in life. There's always some exceptions, but for the most part, we didn't see what we saw. And I guess the greater part of that for me was for us to, like Don Lemon say, don't anybody else say it's not the picture of America. It's the picture. When we look at America, we may see, if we look at a picture, we see a whole lot of things in a picture, and we could interpret what we see by what those images are. So America is just not one pic. It's not just one look. But when we look at it, but we can't ignore the truth, and that was truth. And the one thing I like about truth is that truth needs no props. Truth on its own, and that what we saw was truth for that.
Absolutely. Liz, you want to jump in?
Absolutely. I agree with the idea the truth needs no props. I have spoken with several people in the DEI sphere over the past few weeks and over the past year, even when thinking about inequity and disparity. And I tend to feel like, and maybe Dr. Hayden can speak to this, the idea that sometimes we're asking people to process very advanced concepts where they don't have foundational knowledge. It's just like me in the classroom, I'm telling somebody to write a research paper, a dissertation, they don't know how to write a paragraph. So we're asking people to process implicit bias and cultural competency, systemic racism, all these advanced concepts, but they don't understand, how did Black folk get here? What happened when we got here? What was the horrors that happened? And then what happened once emancipation happened and you had segregation and you had all kinds of legal processes and horror that was a part of that, as far as lynching and vigilante justice that was supplemented by the legal system that created a lot of disparity in terms of education, healthcare, criminal justice system, pretty much any system that we navigate, banking, home ownership, wages, ability to get promotions, anything that you can think of, Black folk have been literally marginalized in every area, but that's historical. That's not something that just happened or something that just happened recently. This is something that is systemic, which means that it's something that is institutional.
Yeah.
And when you have institutional racism, you have the society itself, or the institutions within the society that are propping up all of these systems of discrimination. So that's why I designed the Black History and Culture Academy, because I wanted to provide an avenue for people to educate themselves on the history of our country. We can't talk about, what happened at the Capitol, which we need to talk about it, but let's talk about what happened in the Founding Fathers. Let's talk about how we were enslaved. We weren't slaves. We were brought to this country and were enslaved. We were doctors. We were lawyers. We were artisans. We were farmers. We were court singing and drumming. We were not slaves. And of course, there was slavery, as Professor Williams said. There was slavery, but the slavery, the horror that they sold their brothers and sisters into, I don't think they could have ever imagined what we were going to overcome and have to undergo. And we have to talk about those things. We need to make sure truth, right? The idea that, I didn't know that was America. That is America. And we need to make sure that we make that clear. And the only way to do that is through, like Professor Williams is doing, through just laying it out on the table. We need to make sure that everyone's aware so that we can move forward. As was said earlier, and it was said by the beautiful Maya Angelou, you cannot know where you're going if you don't know where you came from.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for sharing that. Shauna, you want to jump in?
All right. I agree with Dr. Hayden. I received a text message on that day, January the 6th, from a cousin of mine. It was a group text to his mom, my aunties. And he was like, I want y'all to look at what's going on. He said, because y'all promote this failed democracy. And I was like, huh? And I was like, I'm confused. I was like, because I know who I know who I am. And I know, who I am. I know what I'm trying to do. Like I said, I had a degree in criminal justice. So I came out of criminal justice to start teaching, educate, because I felt like I could make a difference there. So I was like, we know that we have a failed democracy. We all know that. We know that if, like B. Mike said, if we were more people of color that day in that crowd, it would have turned out different.
And I think we all know that.
Yeah. And so I'm like, we have to know who we are. We have to educate ourselves. Even
Absolutely.
That day when I was out and about and I came home, I rushed home because my kids do virtual. And I was like, all right, school is over. Let's cut the TV on because I need y'all to see this reality here. What's going on? Because we live out in the suburbs. So they in this, thing like, oh, it's no racism. Oh, everything is happy. I'm like, no, it's not. So you have to expose your kids to these things. What's going on? Even as Liz was saying, some professors and some faculty and teachers were trying to figure out how they were going to teach this the next day. And on a blog, they were saying, well, no, we're not going to teach this. We can't teach it to the elementary kids. I was like, why not? It made national news. We got to teach. We got to speak on it.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Thank you so very much. Thank y'all all for sharing. And V Mike has a showstopper, show still in the so we got another panelist on here taking all the attention. I just had to bring it up. I'm seeing this little puppy like, whoa.
I'm fighting because he's teasing, so.
Oh Lord Jesus. Okay, well, I like that in the name of Jesus. So we're gonna take some final thoughts. This has been absolutely amazing. It's been really deep. This is not the exciting experience that everyone is used to when we have our shows. And it's perfectly fine. It's absolutely perfect. Because these are conversations that we really needed to have. And this is the first day of this month. And we needed to be able to come in, making a difference and allowing people to understand that we want you to do your research. We want you to check out where you came from, where your lineage began. and where it is today, and how we became the creatures of habit, how we became the human beings that we are today, and whether we have some faults in it because we still have free will and choice, or whether we derived in this space because this is what we were groomed to become and who we were groomed to become. So how do we begin to heal newly despite what society is showing us today? Where do we begin? How can we suggest new ways that we can begin cultivating a life of inclusion, acceptance, and peace? So I want y'all to jump in there. Don't everybody jump at one time.
Okay, so I guess I go first.
That's cool.
Honestly, we just need to accept the fact that you start healing when you accept the fact that we all have a part that lives within us, a part of unconscious bias. We all have that. We walk around with it. It's real. It's alive. It thrives. It speaks. It talks. It walks. We all have that. When we can realize that that flaw within ourselves, that not everything, like you say, is peachy keen, or we don't walk around with this great view, this rosy, this rose colored glasses going on, then we can start really actually having that conversation. Because honestly, just because the color of my skin doesn't automatically connect me with somebody that looks like me, because we may have had different experiences and we may have come up different ways, and we have two different ways of looking at things. But we still need to have those conversations amongst ourselves in order to be able to have those conversations in the community. What people say, we agree to disagree. That's correct. We really do agree to disagree. But at the end of the day, we all are trying to get to the same place. And we have to accept the fact that if we're all trying to get to the same place, we can have a different view because we all have different gifts. But those different gifts still get us to the same place. Okay, I will say this. Martin Luther King was a Baptist minister. Malcolm X was a Muslim, and Marcus Garvey was a Pan-Africanism. That's what all three of them believe. That was their platform. That's how they move people. However, they all agreed on one thing. What's going on with our people in our community is not right. That's what they all agreed on. Regardless of what platform they sat on, they all agreed on one thing, and they all were moving toward rectifying that one thing, that they all recognized that what was going on wasn't right. And so that's universal. That's a universal handshake. That's a universal conversation. That is what gets us sitting at the table with a cup of coffee, talking to our brothers and sisters of different nationalities and working this thing out.
And I believe you're right about that. And I think along with them all having another thing in common is that by them announcing who they were spiritually or religiously or whatever we want to look at, I think acknowledgement that each of them were in need of a power greater than their own. And I think part of the problem, once I admit to myself, Mike, there's a power greater than you that you should look to, then it took me to a place of self-examination. So that healing starts with me. It starts within me. And once I began to cry out for healing of my own self as a Christian, there's some fundamental things, born in sin and shaped in iniquity. So one thing that I did in the book I wrote, there was a quote from my sister that said, God didn't create us equal, but he was fair. There's something wrong with everybody. So understanding that there's something wrong with you, something wrong with me. So it takes us to the point of whoever your God is, reach out to him for self-examination, to find and ask him to fix within you that's wrong in you. And then we can, if everybody would do it, at least as a step toward healing.
Awesome. Amen. Thank you so very much. Ladies, I don't want to exclude you. Do you have a sentence or so you'd like to share? We want to acknowledge it is 10:07. So we want to finish out and close out with our final thoughts. Liz or Shauna?
I'll go. When we think about, since this is Black History Month, talk about African American history is American history. I just want everybody to think about, while we're talking about race, can often be emotional. As we already said, you have to get past that trauma. It's sometimes uncomfortable, right? But the work of embodying anti-racism needs to continue. It's something that we all have to work on every day. It's not going to go away. Even like I tell my students, no matter who's in the White House, it's not going to disappear in 4 years. That work is not going to be done because Biden's in office.
Right.
It's going to take every one of us to make a change.
Awesome. Thank you. Liz, final thoughts.
I think my journey has been one of empowering myself to be authentic and walk in my truth. And I think there's a lot of power in the fact that we know we are royalty, we are kings, we are queens, we have so much beauty, so much richness in our culture. So I think a lot of what I've been doing over the past year has just been reflecting on that, reflecting on how much strength we have and how we have the ability to move mountains, and coming together in community like this is something that's really powerful because it lets us know we're not alone. And sometimes we may pray, we may get on our knees, we may cry, but then it helps to have a brother or sister next to you to put their arm around you. And even though we can't be in close proximity to each other, when we develop these communities of support in this way, I really feel like we can move mountains with these kinds of support systems as well.
Thank you so much. Sis, can you share your final thoughts?
Okay. Thank you, my dear sister. And thank you, everybody. Well, allow me to be serious for a minute. My heart aches for the blood of our own ignorance drenched in the red, white, and the blue of our country. From every angle. One of the things I value about Spike Lee, if you know him, he's a creator, good at bringing things to the screen. He is a master at showing all of the angles of racism and bigotry and love. And if you're either doing your part to change the dynamic of racism, perpetuating racism, infecting or affected by racism. You know what I mean? You don't think you're racist, but you're affected by it. So you perpetuate it, or you're a bystander catching a stray bullet of it. I have very dear friends that are not only Black, again, y'all know I don't like that word, but for the sake of this point, I'll use it. And white ones. Some of them on tonight that I love, that they tell me they love me and I love them. But I tell you what, I refuse to be on that rat wheel of racism because it gets you nowhere. And it's just, you sit there and you watch a rat on the wheel and they're going nowhere. And it's just foolish. Like, why do you do that? Why don't you just go off and go somewhere? Right. You know what I mean? I'm not going to press that hate into the world for my own eyes, my own heart, my own actions. And we've heard terms like, that's that privilege. This is something we use. And what that means, my non-Black folks, is that we don't have the privilege of not being on guard at all times. Like my sister Liz said, whenever a cop comes up behind you, we instantly start praying for ourselves. I mean, can you imagine the freedom of not being afraid of being stopped by the police at all and not having to instantly start praying for your life? Or having a son and giving him a license. And then when he first drives without you, you have to teach him, you got to teach him 10 and 2. Right, everybody? Like, keep your hands right here on the wheel. Don't look at the officer in the eyes. Don't make a sudden move. Don't get anything without permission. Tell him every move you make, you better not. Keep your license in the glove box or under the seat. This is how we live. And the same thing is said. Same thing was said in 1950, in 1980, and in 2020. And that's why I put in the commercial a photo. If you notice, there were 3 photos, one of the lynching, one of Bloody Sunday, and one of the knee on the neck. 3 different parts of our timeline. Same thing. All right. So what do? And then we as Black people, I talked about seeing all sides of it, right? We as Black people, we can walk right past each other and don't even say hello. So what is that? Or we suffer with the crabs in the bucket mentality, meaning we're not willing to see someone else climb up and do better. We all fight together, we all win. We all stick together, we win. And there are a lot of white people who put their lives on the line and abandon their whole life by saying that isn't right. That is a Brazilian sacrifice, right? Now, we don't even take the time to achieve education and take it seriously when people were murdered for this right to engage in education and voting. And we just choose not to. What is that? How do we dishonor spilled blood like that? And finally, I want to paint an image of what it means to be Black in America. And I'm going to tell you guys what's beautiful and resilient. You ever drove down, the streets and in the South, and you see these big old beautiful trees, and you think how beautiful that is, right? And then I personally see glimpses, because I'm a student of Black history, of I got it in my head, sis, of Southern trees that bear strange fruit, blood on the leaves and blood at the roots, Black bodies swinging in the southern breeze, strange fruit hanging from the poplar trees. That's being Black in America. Look here, everybody. Tomorrow morning, there's going to be a military salute for Houston's civil rights leader. And I said Houston's civil rights leader, L. Drury Stearns, my beloved uncle by relation, at 10:15 a.m. at the Houston Memorial Cemetery. And I'm going to post the information below. If you want more information about him, because you've never heard his name, then you can Google L. Drury Stearns and the Houston Chronicle, and a great story written by Brittany Brito will come up for more information about his life.
Thank you so much, sis. And if y'all are not familiar with that strange fruit hanging from the trees, I highly recommend that you Google it. Google anything else, Google it. Because it'll give you some perspective. So we see the evident transgressions of today, the sufferings of yesterday, and hear the cries as we hope for tomorrow. As we can see the struggles, fights, we fight in our prayers and desires of our generation today were not so different from the past. What is different is that we use technology and more for our voices. We use those resources and things that our ancestors did not have or have access to or didn't know how to utilize, even today. Yet their voices were heard above the heavens, straight to God's ears, and He hears us today. The question is to you, what will you do now, knowing these facts, this history, and the evidence that has been presented based on historical facts and not fiction? Because you can do the research yourself. How do we rise up and use our voices to heal, to love, forgive, teach ourselves first, then teach our children, and then teach our communities on how to unite and merge together to live amongst one another as one race, as human beings, regardless of the colors of our skin, our gender, our sexual preferences, the textures of our hair, our economic statuses, and other barriers and biases? How do we now come together as one nation, as one voice, under one God, to stand for what is not politically correct, but humanly right? To mend and heal and grow, to contribute to the survival of not just the fittest, but for each of us and our babies and our children and our parents and our grandparents, our lineage and our legacies. What contributions are we making today to ensure that there is a tomorrow to look forward to seeing? Yes, one day we will die. I will die. All of us will leave this earth. Yet today we do live. And while we live, we must work to be that catalyst, that servant leader that hears the not be here for. Yet, so you, to our audience, we call you into action to not only make a difference, but to be the difference in the listening of your children, the parents, the family, the friends, the community, and of the world. Go out and share this information with someone. Share with them what you are now choosing to do to forward this conversation, this movement, this transformation of our people and all people to heal this new world that we strive for, that we live in, and that we are able to create We create with our hands, we create with our minds, we create with our hearts. One person at a time, one life at a time, one healed soul at a time. Let us take action. So thank you so very much for joining us. That is all we have for today's episode of the Real and Raw Talk Show with Nakia Franklin and Vawn Gretta. Thank you for tuning in with me, Nakia Franklin and Vawn Gretta.
Yes, thank you so much. We appreciate and we want to thank our panelist of guests, Professor of African American Studies, Shauna Williams of Houston, Texas, gospel legend, artist, Mr. V. Michael McKay and his puppy of Houston, Texas, and Miss Elizabeth, activist Elizabeth Liz Liba of Miami, Fort Lauderdale, Florida, to our poet, Mr. Daniel Millisock of Maple Valley, Washington, and of course to our very own resident counselor and therapist, because it's all psychology, Dr. Melvin R. Hayden of Savannah, Georgia. You guys, please reach out to our guests for more information about their speaking engagements, their talks, their books, publications, and to seek ways that you can contribute to them as they tonight have contributed to you. And we ask that you do this for all of our current, past, and future guests. Remember, you can join us here every first and third Monday on the Real and Raw Talk Show with Nakia Franklin and Vawn Gretta. And you guys mark your calendars and set your alarms for our next episode, Monday, February 15th, 2021 at 7:55. Now listen, stay tuned because we do have the poetry event coming soon. And so all of you poets, you guys start emailing us right now to get a hold of your opportunity to be featured on the show for a poetry slam. And I want to tell you, for the next episode, you guys, we heard you. The healing episode that we did, we're bringing back Pastor Juanita and, of course, Melvin. And we want to hear from you on how this show, the first one, blessed you. So you guys, please email us and let us know how that helped you. And stay tuned to Facebook and YouTube because we're going to be giving you more information about that. Okay, so more details to come. Like, love, and subscribe to our YouTube channel, Instagram, now Twitter, and Facebook pages for the Real and Raw Talk Show with Nakia Franklin and Vawn Gretta. And like I said, for all of the information, you want to become a sponsor, you have a show idea, you want to be on the show, email us at info.realrawtalkshow@gmail.com. And on the bottom of the screen scrolling, my father said he's working on extracting a memorial for my uncle. So you guys, if you want to contribute to that, please email us and we'll tell you how to do that. Thank you, sis.
Awesome. Thank you so much to our audience. Thank you to our panelists. Thank you to our poet, and to your authenticity, your willingness to be vulnerable and transparent in the no judgment zone where there are no boundaries. So again, I'm Nakia Franklin.
Yes, you are. And I'm Vawn Gretta.
And our resident counselor therapist, because it's all psychology, Dr. Melvin Hayden Jr. PhD. And we are your hosts of the Real
and Raw Talk Show,
where there are no boundaries
and no judgments. Good night, everybody.
Thank you for joining us for another episode of the Real and Raw Talk Show with Nakia Franklin and Vawn Gretta.
Remember to like and follow us on Facebook and Instagram. Also, subscribe to our YouTube channel to stay updated on all of our events.
A special thank you to our guests, sponsors, and audience members. We are grateful for your support of our programming. If you would like to be a guest or sponsor one of our shows, please email us at info.realrawtalkshow@gmail.com. We would love to hear from you. This has been a Wisdom Entertainment production in association with Social Integration.
The views and opinions expressed on the show do not necessarily reflect the official policy or position of the Real and Raw Talk Show with Nakia Franklin and Vawn Gretta. Any content provided are opinions and are not intended to malign any religion, ethnic group, club, organization, company, individual, or anyone or anything. Stay connected and join us for our next conversation where there are no boundaries and no judgments.
And raw, real and raw and raw.